Morning all, let's have a look at game 6 this morning. So d4 was played by Anand, who was white, so knight f6. After c4, Topalov chose e6, as though he might be playing Nimzo Indian if knight c3, but knight f3 was played, so we're in Queen's Indian territory. Topalov played d5, and now after g3, Topalov took that pawn on c4. And Anand, at this moment, just played bishop g2, so he believes he's either going to get the pawn back or he's going to sacrifice a pawn, like a previous game, for long-term pressure. Here Topalov played a6, which introduces the idea of b5 and perhaps bishop b7. The bishop would be kind of good on b7. So white actually locks down that b pawn here by playing knight e5, which also has the idea perhaps of playing knight takes c4 if appropriate. But as mentioned in the previous video, moving the knight here weakens slightly the d4 square, and now black strikes at that d4 square with the move c5. White doesn't really want to exchange queens with d takes because I think black would be fully equalized. Instead, he uses this opportunity for the bishop. It's just being blocked away from a3, so he plays this kind of strange knight move to the edge, like he has done in the previous game successfully. As long as the knight's going to get back to the centre with a capture on c4, that's fine. The downside is he is sacrificing a pawn again in the centre. So for me, this is new Catalan stuff. This is the dynamic Catalan in inverted commas. There is a book called The Dynamic English, by the way, by Tony Costin, and I wonder if someone will do some more dynamic books on the Catalan and feature these games. So white is sacrificing that centre pawn. After knight a takes c4, well, what is the compensation? White has a small lead in development. The d pawn might be dislocated later, like in the previous game, if white, for example, clamps down on black playing e5 ever. I think more importantly, this bishop is going to be superior to this bishop over here, so black's queenside development is going to be an issue. Okay, so bishop c5, protecting that d pawn for the moment, and both sides then castle. Now the move bishop g5. So Topalov doesn't really want to go back with his bishop. He's just, moved it to c5 to support that d4 pawn, and instead he actually kicks that bishop with h6. So asking Anand, does he really want to give up, his bishop pair, which a lot of people, do value. They give kind of a good weight to having the bishop pair. Anand's not worried. I think he takes now on f6 with the idea that, well, these knights can be potentially useful for the central squares, but also he's intensifying his pressure on the light squares in general, and he's gaining another sort of tempo. The queen's not brilliant on f6, so he's hoping perhaps these knights and the semi-open c-file are going to provide enough pressure, and he doesn't need that dark square bishop as much as his other pieces here. So knight d3, bishop a7. Now here, when I was watching it in live commentary, I actually thought, well, maybe white can slowly binds the queen side with a move like b4, a4, a5, just trying to constrain these queenside pawns even more. But he plays a rather curious looking queen move now, queen a4. I say that because black actually, it seems as though he can fork the queen and knight here with b5, but Topalov doesn't do that. Let's have a look. b5. I did check this out with Ribka a couple of days ago, and it's this diagonal which is the real problem. So white would just move the queen somewhere, say b3, and then after takes, just snap up that c pawn, and the rook is left vulnerable without a good defensive move. So white is actually going to end up material here. So that's a nice, neat trick that queen a4 is possible. But what actually is the queen doing on a4 apart from provoking b5? Well, it does mean that knight c6, white can take on c6 and have that queen also recapture. So in other words, if we were to sum up what the queen's doing here, it's kind of stopping black's natural development on the queen side. With a knight on c6 it would be supporting d4 as well, and then maybe e5 as well would be supported if there was a knight on c6. So by Anand stopping that knight c6, that really is hindering black's development here. However, Topalov plays knight c6 anyway. He's a pawn up and he's prepared to counter-sacrifice a pawn here. Anand plays rook ac1, still not minding about b5 here. If we have a look at b5 in this instance, again a queen move, say to a3, and I think this position, say takes, again there's a big problem here on the diagonal and on c6. So it's interesting that because of the pressure, white's able to regain material quite effortlessly in these variations because of this pressure, in particular on this diagonal. So anyway, e5 was played, not minding about this bishop c6. Here, although the queen is protecting c6, black set up another liability, the e5 pawn. So white is able to regain his pawn now. On the upside, by losing this pawn, the e-file is going to be in Topalov's favour later. Some e-file pressure, and he's also liberating his queenside bishop finally. So Anand nevertheless goes in for this. Bishop takes c6, that's what queen a4 was designed for. Now instead of the ordinary recapture by pawn or queen, Topalov plays b5. I think he sees this diagonal as being useful for his bishop on c8. And indeed that looks to be a dangerous piece later, this queenside bishop. So Anand plays queen c2 here. And now not b takes c4. That would leave black with some pawn structure problems. Instead, just queen takes c6, a pure sack of the e pawn. Anyway, he's going to gain some counterplay on the e file later with that new road opened up, as we'll see. So knight c takes e5. So Anand's regained his pawn. Then we have a curious imbalance: the two knights versus the two bishops. Which pair of pieces is better? Well, queen e4 was played. Logical move. Eyeing e2, preparing maybe bishop b7. So black's got some counterplay. Queen c6 was played by Anand, inviting the exchange of queens to go into this curious imbalance of an endgame. So bishop b7, queens come off. Now the move rook c2. So rook move 20. This is a long one, this game, 58 moves. I wonder if I should stop the video here, now that the queens have come off, and let you think about this position before the next video. It's a very interesting imbalance. Does white's possession of the c-file give an advantage? That's something for you to think about. Or are these two bishops, are they able to get into good positions? Or is this bishop condemned because of this pawn on d4? So these are some of the questions in this position, which have a think, and I'll get cracking on the next part while you do that. Okay, please leave any comments or questions on YouTube so far. Thanks very much.